I know you're feeling, comrade. You were really bored one day when you were surfing the internet, and then it happened. Your suggested bar all of a sudden was like, pronouns. You casually clicked out of curiosity, not knowing that your entire worldview was about to change. Now, 2 months and a mysterious number of YouTube channels later, you ended up clicking on this shit. Revolutionary ideology has to be more than my Twitter feed. Even if some of the tips I'm giving here are completely irrelevant to your life situation, I still encourage you to watch all 5. It might be useful for you in later activism when you encounter people that should hear this, which is to a high degree young people that haven't done shit with their lives yet, like me. I am still lacking in a lot of life experience, but based on conversations with more experienced revolutionaries, their experience and my own thoughts, I think I have something to say. 1. Avoid debt and work as little as possible. Debt is hurtful all the time. You should work as little as possible, because work takes time and so does activism. Needing to pay down a loan. Do you say that in English? Do you say pay down a loan? We say it in Norwegian. Needing to pay a loan really just makes your life situation a lot less flexible, as you'll be dependent on more income, that is, more work. I'm not going to straight out tell you to not go to a university/college, since there are good arguments to go even for revolutionaries, but I will tell you to consider if you can do without it, or postpone it so that you can do it without loans later. How practical that is going to be for you massively varies between countries and individual life situations. Now, school aside, working little can leave time for more useful stuff. Like the rest of this list, working little can be achieved in 2 obvious ways. Either you increase your income per hour, or you decrease your expenses, leading to you having to work fewer hours. I'll give a tiny list now of stuff you might want to look into. Your main expense is always going to be where you live. What? That was like me trying to be a news anchor. One more time. Your main expense is always going to be where you live. The expenses increase with every square foot you live on, so a goal should be to live on as few of those as possible. If you can maintain a low level of physical consumption, as well as having well thought out, multifunctional furniture, like not using a bunch of floor space only for a bed, which I do right there. You can't see it, but it's there. Actually, I'm touching it with my toe. Replacing a lot of cooking equipment with a multi-cooker. Have your table also be storage space, and the list goes on. You can massively decrease your monthly expenses if you're being systematic. This unlocks time to sit down writing evil plans to tear down the government of your country of choice. If you're willing to take it a step further, consider building a micro house, or getting an online job and work from a country with low prices. In some countries, the American minimum wage is actually a lot of money, allowing you to comfortably work part-time. You can use Numbeo to make those plans. It's a really good site. If you want to hear me talk more about revolution, lifestyle, and time, then I have a video covering that topic too. Learn useful skills. When people discover revolutionary ideology, the gut response is very often, I need to read all these books. And while that is useful, don't forget that organization depends just as much on other kinds of skills that will often be neglected. That list of useful skills ranges between like everything. Cooking food, production of video, programming, construction work, writing, etc. and things I didn't think of, you name it. You should give it a thought about what you could contribute with, but if we're getting a little general, I have one specific suggestions that any aspiring revolutionary should think about. I actually have an entire video dedicated to this topic, and it is of course foreign languages. Again, thinking about flexibility. If we have a lot of language skills in our community, we can influence a lot of places and maintain contact with a lot of places. If I speak Norwegian and English, I can at best interact with about 2 billion people. The number is perhaps far lower. If I, on the other hand, speak Spanish and Hindi in addition to that, that's almost an entire additional billion people I could become useful for whenever an interesting political event demanding international solidarity occurs. However, I am not planning to basically make that video one more time, so if you're interested in my thoughts on languages, it's probably going to be recommended at the end screen of this video. Also, I have a video on Esperanto specifically I also want you to watch. Yes, there are videos I've made that I have not recommended in this video. That one, programming. Increasing the number of people in our community that can develop software is incredibly useful. This is not something I think that every serious revolutionary has to do, but some should. A lot of otherwise hard to make people do practices that are incredibly important, like range voting, which I talked about in my How to Direct Democracy video, are all of a sudden easy to make people do if their voting software has it as its default option. If you're developing tools, you can basically create the premises for human behavior. The group admin in an anarcho-communist Facebook group might think they're deciding how the Facebook group is going to be organized, and to a large extent they are, but the developers of Facebook set the premises if they, let us say, and I'm not saying this is a good idea, added a function where group members in every Facebook group could force an internal Facebook group election, the dynamics within Facebook groups would be dramatically different and we would have no control as consumers. Now, think about all the software and other tools you use on a daily basis. That's an incredible number of developers creating the premises for your behavior. We can make people do a lot of cool things if we exploit this consciously. I mentioned programming specifically, but what I've said is also true for other kinds of tools we use on a daily basis. For example, the building you live in, the backpack you wear, the storage box you use for food, etc. I have a food thermos, and since I started using that regularly, my diet has become far healthier, because this thing encourages me to eat soups, and since I'm a vegan as well, that basically means that vegetable soups are my lunch on school days. And when we're talking about health, step 3, take care of your health. Congratulations, you've signed up for a hell of a marathon! I might be a huge revolutionary optimist, but I do assume that I will finish puberty. Heck, I could do it multiple times before I live in a stable libertarian socialist society. In other words, if you're in this for the long run, you're in it for the long run. If you want to be that, you have to take care of yourself so you avoid the famous activist burnout. You're far more useful if you can give 80% for 50 years than 100% for 3 years. This means take breaks when you need them, eat a healthy diet. After all, if you get a heart attack in your 50s, you won't be participating in crushing capitalism anymore. Sleep enough, meditate if that's your kind of thing, and of course maintain some physical activity. You might have heard this before. You can also watch my least successful video, Revolutionary Activism and Health, where I basically repeat the average vegan gains nutrition science video with a tiny bit of nuance. Not being qualified to say anything about nutrition at all, for seek the unknown. You and I might or might not have something in common. We feel like we know everything, when we're in fact really fucking lacking in a lot of necessary knowledge to achieve our goals. Let us try to be mindful of that and remain open-minded towards that we might be wrong in fundamental important questions. Actually, let me rephrase that. We are probably wrong in some fundamental questions. Something I see a lot of newly radicalized individuals do is that they kind of choose a path and then they isolate themselves and dig them far down in the path. Some people become anarchists and they end up reading only anarchist literature. Others become Marxists and end up reading only Marxist literature. Some of them becoming completely nuts. This often leads to people dogmatically following theories that might or might not be fitting today without developing them. As much as I like anarcho-syndicalism, I think it's reasonable to assume that anarcho-syndicalist tactics need to look different today than they did for the C&T during and before the Spanish Revolution. Therefore, I challenge you to constantly try to change your own mind. This is the only way we can mature our own opinions and end up with an analysis and a strategy that can actually win in the battle against like every institution that exists. That means meet new people, discuss with them, try to understand where they're coming from, even if their opinions seem ridiculous at first. I'm not saying they will change your mind, but they might influence you in several ways, because people with ridiculous ideas can also have small good ideas somewhere. Terence McKenna is, in my opinion, an example of this kind of person. At one moment, he tries to convince you that humans are intelligent because our ancestors ate a lot of psilocybin mushrooms. That's why we have big brains. The next moment, he'll give you some insight into some of the absurdity of human social constructs. Show up at weird meetings. Maybe those Extinction Rebellion folks have something nice to say that will influence you in some way, even though many of them lack an anti-capitalist analysis. I know for sure that when I have changed my mind, it often has not been because I read some groundbreaking theory in a book, but because of experience talking to people I disagree with. I'm not telling you to engage in friendly debate with extreme right. Don't interpret it that way. 5. Prioritize comrades that are serious. I haven't been active long enough to have gained that much experience, but this is something you might learn very, very quickly depending on where you live in the world and what you're doing. Here in Norway, a country where, well, we're kind of doing okay, becoming an anarchist isn't necessarily exactly a huge defining life event. You see, we don't really have to take a systemic change seriously unless we want to, and a lot of people don't take it seriously. The thing about those people is that in our situation, where a systemic change is so far away that it seems abstract and impossible, these people aren't willing to do anything drastic, and drastic action is just what's needed to, overthrow governments. What I'm trying to say is that in these beginning phases that we're in, passive supporters won't really contribute that much. Prioritize contact and activity with serious comrades that, when you figure out the tactics, are willing to change their life situation drastically for making stuff work. 10-15 extremely dedicated individuals working in tight coordination can organize a lot, and by that I mean a lot more than 100, maybe even 200 supporters that will show up at an organization's meeting only if they have nothing else to do that evening. That doesn't mean you shouldn't engage with more passive supporters, it just means that the serious activists that are willing to a lot is where our focus needs to be right now. When we've established revolutionary organizations around the world that are somewhat stable, we can begin focusing on gaining popular support. Now, thanks for watching this. If you thought it was useful, then I want you to leave a like, maybe comment something cool, click the subscribe button, and most importantly, the bell. You could also share my video on social media. As you can see, I'm quite a small content creator at this point, so I want to get large, Oh god, I felt so intensely like a teenager now. Oh my god.